I woke up one night to find my sister standing over my bed, wearing that cursed red dress from the market, her eyes wide open, staring down at me, whispering my name in a voice that wasn't hers. She wasn't asleep, but she wasn't awake either. Then she smiled, a slow, twisted smile, and said, "You can't take it from me," before lifting a knife I didn't even know she had. My name is Amina, and this happened 2 years ago in our small village in Nigeria. I was 19 then, living with my younger sister, Zainab, and our mom in a cramped mud house with a rusty tin roof that creaked when the wind blew. Life was simple, predictable: wake up at dawn, fetch water from the well, go to school, cook dinner, sleep. We didn't have much money, just enough to get by selling vegetables Mom grew in our tiny backyard. Nothing strange ever happened to us, nothing to make me think twice about the world around me. That all changed when that red dress came into our lives and pulled us into a nightmare I still can't wake up from. It started on a Saturday, one of those hot, sticky days where the air feels heavy and the sun beats down like it's angry. Zainab and I went to the market to buy tomatoes, onions, and maybe some dried fish if we had coins left. The market was loud, traders shouting prices, chickens clucking in wooden cages, the smell of sweat and spices mixing with dust that stuck to your skin. We were weaving through the crowd, our plastic bags half full, when Zainab stopped dead at an old woman's store. The woman was hunched over, her face wrinkled like dry leather, selling clothes spread out on a mat, faded shirts with holes, wrappers stained yellow from years of use, and then that dress. It was bright red, cleaner than anything else there, with little black patterns stitched into the fabric like tiny flowers. It didn't belong in that mess of old things. "How much?" Zainab asked, her voice soft, almost like she was afraid to touch it. She ran her fingers over the hem, her eyes fixed on it. The woman looked up and grinned, showing cracked, yellow teeth. 500 naira. It's special. Won only once. 500 naira was nothing for something that nice. I grabbed Zainab's arm and pulled her back a step. "We don't need it," I said. "Mom will kill us if we waste money." But Zainab wouldn't budge. "It's perfect for church," she said, her voice louder now, insistent. "I'll use my own savings. I've got enough from helping Mama Tolu with her chickens." I argued, told her it was too good to be true, that we didn't know where it came from, but she kept staring at it, like it was pulling her in. I gave up. She handed over the money, and the woman folded it into a plastic bag, still grinning. "Take care of it," she said, her voice low. "It has a story." I rolled my eyes. Old people always said stuff like that to sound important. We got home, and Zainab couldn't wait to try it on. She slipped it over her head, and it fit her like it was made for her, tight around her waist, the hem brushing just above her knees. She spun around our tiny room, laughing, her braids swinging. Even Mom, who usually scolded us for spending, smiled and said, "You look like a proper lady." Zainab beamed and hung it on a nail on the wall by her bed, right next to where she slept. I didn't think much of it, just a dress, just another day. The first strange thing happened a few days later. Zainab wore it to church that Sunday. The service was normal, hymns, prayers, the pastor's voice booming over the wooden benches, but people kept staring at her. Not the usual, "Oh, she looks nice," stares. These were different, nervous, like they were trying to figure something out. After, as we walked home, our neighbor Mama Tolu pulled me aside. She was a big woman, always sweating, with a scarf tied tight around her head. "Amina," she said, her voice low, "where did she get that dress?" I told her about the market, the old woman. She frowned, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Be careful. Things from that place can carry trouble. I've seen it before." I laughed it off. Mama Tolu loved her superstitions, ghosts in the trees, spirits in the wind. I figured she was just bored and making up stories. That night, I woke up to Zainab mumbling. It was late, the room dark except for a sliver of moonlight coming through the window. She was lying in her bed, eyes closed, but her lips were moving fast, jumbled sounds, like she was talking to someone I couldn't see. I sat up and listened, trying to catch a word, but it was nonsense. Zainab, I whispered. No answer. I shook her shoulder. She jolted awake, blinking at me. What's wrong? She asked, rubbing her eyes. I told her she was talking in her sleep. She laughed, sleepy and confused. You're hearing things, Amina. Go back to bed. I didn't push it, but I lay there after, staring at the ceiling, listening to the crickets outside. Something felt off. It didn't stop. Every night, she'd mumble, sometimes just sounds, sometimes names I didn't recognize, Kemi, Bola, Esther. I'd wake her up sometimes, and she'd always say the same thing, no memory, no idea what I was talking about. During the day, she started looking tired, dark circles under her eyes, her shoulders slumping like she was carrying something heavy. I asked if she was okay. Just not sleeping well, she'd say, brushing me off. I told Mom one morning while we were pounding yam. She sighed and said, it's probably school. Too much reading. I wasn't so sure. School never made her look like that. About a week later, things got worse. I woke up one night because the room felt cold, freezing, like someone had opened a door to a storm. That didn't happen in our village, not with the heat we lived in. I opened my eyes and saw Zainab standing in the middle of the floor, wearing the dress. Her arms hung loose at her sides, her head tilted back a little, and her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. She was whispering those names again, Kemi, Bola, Esther, over and over, her voice soft but steady. I called her name. Zainab. Nothing. I got out of bed, my heart pounding, and grabbed her arm. Her skin was cold as stone. I shook her hard, yelling her name until she blinked and looked at me. Amina. What's going on? She said, like she'd just woken up from a nap. I told her she was standing there, talking, wearing that dress. She frowned. I didn't even put it on tonight. You were dreaming. But I wasn't. The dress was on her, and I'd felt her cold skin. She went back to bed, and I sat up all night, watching her. The next morning, I told Mom everything. She didn't say much at first, just kept stirring the pot of egusi soup on the fire. Then she asked to see the dress. Zainab pulled it out of her bag, she hadn't hung it back up after church, and Mom held it, running her fingers over the fabric. Her face changed, like she'd seen something she didn't want to. Where did you say you got this? She asked, her voice tight. I told her about the old woman at the market. Mom set the dress down and told us to stay home. She grabbed her wrapper and left without another word. When she came back hours later, her eyes were wide, her hands shaking. She'd gone to Mama Tolu and some of the village elders. They knew the dress. It belonged to a girl who died, Mom said, sitting us down on the mat in our room. Her name was Adana. Years ago, she wore it the day she drowned in the river. Her family sold her things after, but people say her spirit stayed with that dress. The market woman shouldn't have sold it. They say it's cursed. Zainab laughed, nervous but loud. That's just a story, Mom. It's a dress, not a ghost. I didn't laugh. I'd seen her that night, standing, whispering, cold. Mom didn't argue with Zainab. She just said, we are burning it. Tonight. Zainab fought her, yelled that it was hers, that she loved it, that we were crazy. But Mom wasn't having it. We dragged it outside, poured kerosene from the lamp on it, and lit it with a match. The flames roared up fast, higher than they should have, and the smoke smelled wrong, sour, thick, like something dead. Zainab cried, tears streaming down her face as it burned. I stood there, watching the red turn to black ash, hoping it was over. For a few days, things seemed fine. Zainab stopped mumbling at night, and the tired look faded from her face. She went back to joking around, helping Mom with chores. I started to relax, thinking we'd dodged something bad. Then one evening, I came back from the well with a bucket of water and found her sitting on the floor, staring at the wall where the dress used to hang. Her legs were crossed, her hands resting limp in her lap. I called her name. No answer. I set the bucket down and touched her shoulder. She turned to me slow, her eyes dull. "They are still here," she said. Her voice was deep, rough, not hers at all. I screamed for Mom, dropping the bucket, water spilling everywhere. Mom came running in from the backyard, her hands still muddy from planting. She saw Zainab and froze. "What did she say?" she asked. I told her. Mom grabbed Zainab's face, looking into her eyes, but Zainab just stared back, blank. Then she blinked and said, "What's wrong with you two?" like nothing happened. Mom didn't buy it. She called a healer the next day, an old man named Baba Sonny, who lived on the edge of the village. He showed up with a sack of herbs, white chalk, and a small drum. He walked around the house, chanting in a language I didn't know, sprinkling water from a calabash, burning incense that made my throat itch. He said the dress had brought something, maybe Adana's spirit, maybe something worse, and burning it didn't send it away. It was still here, tied to Zainab. She sat through it all, quiet, staring at the floor. By morning, she seemed normal again, but she wouldn't talk about it. She just said she felt tired and went to lie down. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few weeks later, Zainab started disappearing. She'd leave the house after lunch and come back at dusk, her sandals dusty, her face blank. She wouldn't say where she went. One day, I followed her, keeping my distance so she wouldn't see me. She walked straight to the river, the same one where Adana drowned. It was a wide, muddy stretch of water, surrounded by tall grass and crooked trees. Zainab stood at the edge, her toes almost touching the current, staring down into it. She was muttering those names again, Kemi, Bola, Esther, and then she said something new, "I'm coming." I ran up and grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "What are you doing?" I yelled. She turned to me, slow, and smiled, that same creepy smile from that night. "It's calling me," she said. I dragged her home, my hands shaking, her laughing like it was a game. That night, I woke up to scratching. It was loud, coming from outside. I checked Zainab's bed, she was gone. I ran out and found her in the yard, clawing at the dirt where we'd burned the dress. Her fingers were bloody, nails torn, dirt packed under them. She was whispering, "It's mine. It's mine." I grabbed her shoulders and pulled, but she fought me, stronger than she'd ever been. Her elbow hit my chest, knocking the wind out of me. Mom heard the noise and ran out, her wrapper slipping off one shoulder. We wrestled Zainab back inside and tied her to the bed with a rope from the goat pen. She thrashed and screamed until her voice went hoarse, then passed out. We sat there, crying, waiting for Baba Sonny. When he came back the next morning, he brought an old woman with him, Mama Aisha, from a village 2 hours away. She was tiny, bent over, with a scarf covering most of her gray hair. She said she knew Adana. That dress was her favorite, she told us, her voice raspy. Her mother cursed it after she drowned, said anyone who wore it would carry her pain, her anger. Adana didn't just die. She was pushed by someone who wanted her gone. That's why she won't leave. Baba Sonny did another ritual, longer this time. He beat his drum, chanted louder, poured oil on the floor that smoked when it hit the ground. Zainab screamed through it, not words, just raw, animal sounds that made my skin crawl. By dawn, she stopped. She fell asleep, and when she woke up, she didn't remember anything. She asked why her hands were bandaged, why we looked so tired. We didn't tell her. I thought that was it. I was wrong again. A month later, I went to the market for salt and passed the old woman's stall. The red dress was there, clean, bright, hanging on a stick like it was brand new. My stomach dropped. I'd seen it burn, watched it turn to ash. The woman looked up and grinned. Back for it, she asked, her voice dripping with something I couldn't place. I ran home, my heart slamming against my ribs. I checked on Zainab, she was fine, sitting outside peeling yam with Mom. But I couldn't shake it. How was it back? Then came the night that broke me. I woke up to Zainab standing over my bed. She wasn't wearing the red dress, just her old nightshirt, but she had a kitchen knife in her hand, the blade glinting in the moonlight. Her eyes were blank, like glass. She whispered, "You took it from me, Amina." I screamed and rolled off the bed, hitting the floor hard. Mom burst in, and we grabbed her together, wrestling the knife away. She snapped out of it, crying, saying she didn't know how she got there. Baba Sonic came again the next day. He said the spirit didn't need the dress anymore, it had jumped, rooted itself in Zainab. Banning it hadn't worked. He did another ritual, but he looked worried when he left. "It's strong," he said. "Stronger than I thought." We decided to move after that. Packed up everything, our mats, our pots, Mom's vegetable baskets, and left the village for a town an hour away. For a while, it worked. Zainab seemed normal, no whispering, no staring, no disappearing. She started helping at a tailor's shop, learning to sew. I thought we'd escaped. Then, 6 months later, I found her in our new room, sewing something in secret. It was a red dress, rough, uneven, made from scraps of fabric she'd collected. She looked up at me, her hands trembling. "I don't know why I made it," she said. "I just had to." I took it and burned it in the backyard, watching the flames until it was gone. The next day, she started another one. Every time I destroyed it, she'd make a new one, always red, always the same shape. She'd hide them under her bed, in her bag, behind the door. I'd find them and burn them, and she'd cry but never explain. Then came the next twist. One night, I woke up to singing, soft, eerie, coming from outside. I found Zainab standing in the yard, barefoot, staring at the sky. She wasn't sewing, wasn't holding anything, just singing words I didn't understand. Her voice was high, then low, switching like two people were inside her. I shook her awake, and she blinked at me. "Why am I out here?" she asked. I didn't know what to say. The singing started happening every few nights. Sometimes I'd catch her humming during the day, tunes I'd never heard, her eyes far away. A year after we moved, I went back to our old village to see Mama Tolu. I needed answers. She welcomed me into her house, gave me a cup of watery tea, and listened as I told her everything. When I finished, she got quiet. Then she said, "The old woman from the market, she's been dead for years. Died before you even bought that dress. No one knows who's been at her store since." My hands went cold. I asked how that was possible. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out an old photo from a tin box under her bed. It was Adana, young, smiling, wearing the red dress. I stared at it, my breath catching. She looked exactly like Zainab, same round face, same wide eyes, same smile. Mama Tolu said, "Some say Adana never left. Some say she waits for someone to take her place." I didn't tell Zainab about the photo. I couldn't. When I got back, she was sitting outside, sewing again, another red dress, this one almost finished. I burned it that night, but the next morning, I found her standing by the fire pit, staring at the ashes. She turned to me and said, "It won't let me stop." Her voice was hers, but her eyes weren't. The final twist came last month. I woke up to silence, no singing, no sewing. I checked Zainab's bed, she was gone. I searched the house, the yard, the streets. No sign of her. Then I saw it, a trail of red thread leading from her bed out the door, into the bushes behind our house. I followed it, my heart pounding, until it stopped at a stream, not the river from our old village, but close enough. There, on the bank, was a pile of red fabric scraps, soaked in water. No Zainab. I called her name, searched until the sun came up, but she was gone. Mom thinks she ran away. I don't. I think it took her, the dress, the spirit, whatever it was. 2 years later, I'm still here, alone with Mom in this new town. I check the house at night, lock the doors, burn any red cloth I see. I dream of Zainab standing over me, smiling, whispering my name. Sometimes I hear singing outside, faint, carried on the wind. I don't know if it's her or Adana or something else. I don't know if she's gone or if she's waiting. This whole mess taught me lessons I'll never forget, and they're not just about a dress. First, don't trust things that seem too good to be true. Cheap doesn't mean safe. That red dress was a steal at 500 naira, but it came with a price we couldn't see until it was too late. Zainab's peace, our family's sanity. It's like picking up a shiny coin off the ground without checking if it's tied to a trap. What looks like a gift can be a curse in disguise. Second, listen when people warn you, even if it sounds like nonsense. Mama Tolu tried to tell me something was off, but I laughed it off because I thought I was smarter than her old stories. I wasn't, and that cost us. Third, some things don't let go easy. Burning that dress didn't end it, it just made it angrier, stronger. You can't always fight what you don't understand, but you can run, and sometimes that's the only way to save yourself. Fourth, protect the people you love, even from themselves. Zainab didn't see what was happening to her. She loved that dress, couldn't let it go, but I saw it, and I wish I'd acted faster, torn it away before it sank its claws into her. Finally, the past isn't always dead. It can reach out and grab you if you're not careful. That dress carried Adana's story, her pain, her rage, and we got tangled in it because we didn't ask questions, didn't dig deeper. Life's full of traps like that, things that look harmless but carry weight you can't handle. Stay sharp, trust your gut, and don't let greed or curiosity pull you into something you can't escape. If you feel that chill, that whisper telling you something's wrong, don't ignore it, because once it's in your house, it might never leave. Thanks for sticking with me through this wild, creepy tale. It's one that still keeps me up at night, wondering where Zainab is and what really took her. If this story gave you chills, made you rethink that next market bargain, or just kept you hooked, smash that like button to let me know I hit the mark. Share it with your friends who love a good scare or need a heads up about cassette deals. Maybe it'll save them some trouble. And if you're hungry for more stories like this, real, raw, and straight from the edge, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I've got plenty more to tell, and I'd love to have you along for the ride. Drop a comment too. What would you have done with that dress? Stay safe out there, and maybe skip the red dresses next time you're shopping.